Hey, what's up everyone? Aaron from Unison here. Today I want to talk about bass lines. For me, I do a lot of dance music, and in dance music, one of the most crucial elements to making that kind of music is the bass line, be it pretty much any style. And so today I wanted to go over one particular style, which is, making house music and just the many various styles that are in house music that all can kind of really heavily rely on bass lines. Now, the tips that I do go over today, they may not necessarily correlate to every style, even outside of dance music. Like say you're doing hip hop or something like that, kind of a totally different ball game there. But hopefully what I teach today can kind of translate over to other styles, and you'll at least think about some of these things when you are working on your bass lines. So let's go ahead and jump into it. All right, so as most of my videos, we are going to be going over 5 different key points today about bass lines. And the first thing I want to talk about is note length. And so with note length, it can really make or break a track, especially in more dance music focused stuff. Usually you want to have a bounce to it. You want people to dance. And so if you were to have a bunch of sustained notes in say like a drop, it's just going to kind of take away from the bounce. So I feel having more shorter notes can definitely help. So let's check out the bass line that I have here. This is what it sounds like in context of my drop. And so, there are some notes that are sustained, but it still has that bounce. As you can see here, there's a lot of variation going on. We have some shorter notes, but we also have some more sustained notes. Now, what I can also do is take this first note here, for example, and make it shorter, just like this here, and it will add a bit more bounce because there's that like pause in between. So if we listen, you can even kind of play around with it and make it a bit longer here. It's just kind of finding like that sweet spot in between. So then you can kind of vary between the two. You have like these shorter ones here, and then say that the second and third and fourth time around, you have these longer ones. Just to kind of switch it up as well. It's really all about variation, but it is also about repetitiveness as well, which actually is the second thing I wanted to talk about. So if we look here, I went ahead and changed up the bass line just to make it not as repetitive. And so now let's go ahead and listen to it, see how it sounds. And so as you can see here, there's a lot of kind of randomness happening, which can be good if it's done correctly. But in this particular case, especially with house music, you want to be kind of like hypnotic. And so the repetitiveness can be good. Now, what I personally would do is I would just go ahead and take these notes, take them to how they were before. Let me see here. And take these down. And then I would just leave this last phrase here. So repetitive, repetitive, repetitive. There's a slight change here. Oh, that's why. There's slight variation, but the notes are still the same. And then this very last one, which is the fourth bar here, you would have this kind of variation. So now it would sound like this. And so, that can be nice to have the repetitiveness like that. I mean, it's kind of like when you have a chorus of a song and someone's singing a particular phrase or line, hearing it over and over, it gets stuck in your head. It's easy to remember. It's easy to kind of sing or hum along to. And so it's the same thing with, in this particular case, we're using a bass line for the main element. And so by making that repetitiveness happen, but still having some variation happen, it can just get stuck in your head. The listener might be humming to it, or even you're humming to it if you made it and you're like, oh, it's really catchy. And so that's a good sign, obviously, because it's the same thing as like with the chorus of like a song where someone's singing. You want to be infectious and stuck in a listener's head. By the way, if you like the bass sounds that are being used in today's video, most of them come from Unison's Deep House collection for Serum. There'll be a link in the description below for where you can go and pick that up. All right, let's get back into the video now. All right, next we're going to be talking about octaves. And so what I mean by that is, you could go and have, for example, here, if I were to take my bass note and bring it down to the root, which is this B, then if I were to just go ahead and keep them all the same, there wouldn't be as much variation. But by going and taking certain notes and pitching them up or down an octave, it can make for more variation in your bass line, but the notes are still essentially the same, which kind of ties back into that repetitiveness. Next, we're going to talk about groove. And so here, as you can see, some of these notes aren't exactly on the downbeats of certain grid notes. Like this one is halfway in between. So if I were to make this a bit more of like a rigid bass line by just choosing to do just that note, and say I did this one too, and just put it here. Let's have a listen to that now. Oh, and this one too. Though it's more on the grid itself. And then we'll extend this. See, it just feels too, like to the grid. It doesn't have as much bounce to it. It doesn't feel as fun. It just feels too, just like robotic. So, I mean, it could work if you're trying to go for that, but personally, I like more bouncier bass lines and just more bouncy music in general. You want to have fun when you're listening to this type of music, especially if you're in like a club and you're dancing. And so by going and just kind of throwing them off onto these kind of like half beats like this, it just adds a lot more groove to it. And so, here I could go and even throw this over here. And it just has that nice kind of bounce to it because it's just on those off beats. So even here, if I wanted to throw it right here, it might be a little funky. See, and even that, it just adds like a nice bounce to it as well because I'm throwing them on these kind of half grid. So what I did there is I just hit Control and the number 1 on a PC. I think on Mac it is Command and 1, and you can make the grid basically more smaller or more larger like that. And so I just went and did that so that I could hone in. And so as you can see here, it's on the 4th beat of this particular bar. Well, actually, I guess these are all beats here. There's 1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. And so these are smaller beats inside of each beat. So if we were to count, it would be like 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and so on and so forth. So just by kind of dialing into these smaller slivers of the grid here, it just makes for a lot more bounce versus if we were to just stick to like these bigger marks here on the grid, it would just make it a lot more rigid. All right, so the last thing we're going to talk about today is layering your bass lines. And what I mean by that is not, copying over a sound and copying the entire bass line over. I'm talking about kind of accenting certain notes in your bass line just to kind of have certain parts of it stand out. It works good for, if you have your bass line happen in, say, like the first drop, you just leave it as is. And then maybe either a second part of the first drop or even in the second drop, just kind of adding a bit of variation and just adding these like accented notes to just kind of switch up the bass line itself and just add some nice accents to it. So for example, here I have my same exact bass line as I was showing previously. However, it is up an octave. This is later in the song, just to give you context here. And so I have this other bass layer. And so this is a lower one, but then this is the other main sound. It's just up an octave higher. So together. And so additionally, what I mainly want to talk about is this right here. These are just little accent notes that I added to just kind of highlight certain notes in the bass line. So for context, and so again, it just kind of adds that extra bounce, that extra flavor to the bass line. And so it makes it a bit more interesting as the song progresses out. So again. And so, I can also go and try it with other notes here. And so if I were to go ahead and copy over my bass line by just double clicking on this clip here, and I just do Control A or Command A on Mac, and then Control C, Command C on Mac to just copy all the notes from this bass line. I'm just going to paste them in here so that we have all the notes here. And so then I can kind of audition different notes and see which ones might be the best for accenting. Now I did end up going with, I think it was this one and this one. Let me bring these down an octave too. But if we want to try some others out, we can do that as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and select them all again, Control A, and just hit the 0 key, which will turn them all off. And then I can use the 0 key to highlight certain notes and turn them on to audition certain ones. So like I said, I had this one and this one. And so we know we like those, but what if we did maybe this F and maybe this one here? Kind of switch it up. Here, we'll turn them all on. So see, as you can see, it's not as strong if I were to choose these particular notes. Again, choosing, say, this one and maybe this one. But as you can see, it's not really accenting to the groove. It's better just having it kind of on these offbeats like this. And all of these notes so far are kind of sitting on either the beginning of a bar or exactly on the beginning of a bar, like right here. And so having these where it's halfway through this little beat here, it just adds that bit of extra swing to it. So that's why I chose these two particular ones. And so if I just highlight those and then Control D or Command D to duplicate over, now I have this. And that sounds great to me. Alright, thank you so much for watching this video. Hopefully you learned something from this video and can take it and apply it to your own music, whatever the style might be. If you found this video helpful, consider leaving a thumbs up on the video, a comment as well if you have any feedback or thoughts about this video, as well as give the channel a follow too. Also, if you like the sounds that were used in today's video, most of them come from Unison's artist series. You can pick them up on their website and you can find them at the link below. Thanks everyone, and we'll see you next time.